Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Super Feeler podcast. My name is Lori, and I'm super excited today to be joined by Valerie Porr from Tara for BPD. And Valerie's been doing BPD advocacy for, 30,
3 years.
33 years? Unreal. I am 31 years old. So you've been doing BPD advocacy for literally longer than I've been alive. And you're an author. Yes. Well, we'll get there. Your book's in the mail, unfortunately, so I haven't had a chance to read one of your books yet. I plan to. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself just generally and how this all came to be?
Okay, I have a degree in biology and in psychology, a master's in education and chemistry, and I'm also an artist. So at the time that I started all of this, I was a pretty well-known fashion designer in the New York world, like what you're all buzzing about nowadays. I've had pieces in several museums, the Metropolitan Museum, Museum of Fashion Industries, etc. And I was in the middle of that whole New York art world. And somebody I knew was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And I said, oh, wow, I'm the psychology person. I'm going to look it up. And when I looked it up, I thought, this is totally crazy. None of this makes any sense. And one of the things that I read that I thought was extremely ridiculous was that if you're looking at kids, if a kid was 17 and 364 days, that kid was not a borderline, but at 365 days on his birthday, when he became 18, he became a borderline, which, in my world, it was like a bar mitzvah. It was a mental health bar mitzvah. It just didn't make any sense. So
And it still doesn't.
Oh, it still doesn't. And they changed that in the year 2000, and most doctors are still doing the same thing, that you can't diagnose it until they're 18, which is completely incorrect. At any rate, I started looking at the science, and the fact that I live in the art world of New York is very relevant to my advocacy work, because when you are on first name basis and friends with the top artists that you see in every museum, and Robert Rauschenberg, and Rosenquist, you even have a crush on him, and so on and so forth. When you meet Otto Kernberg, it's not very impressive, because for me, what was impressive was who's hanging in the museums. And so I was never afraid to approach the very top people and ask them questions and express my doubts and so on. And being a New Yorker and wearing short skirts and blonde hair, I mean, I guess I got a reputation, but I knew my stuff, so it was very hard for them to just dismiss me. And somewhere along the line, I heard about Marsha Linehan. And when I heard about Marsha Linehan, I thought, well, wow, this sounds like something different from everything that's the very, very little that was in the literature at the time. So I don't know how I did this to this day, but about 5 blocks from my house was the New York City Department of Mental Health. I trotted myself down there and I said, why don't you do anything on borderline personality disorder? And I kept making noise, and I wound up with getting some money from New York City and New York State to do the first conference for DBT in New York City, which was quite something. And I have
What year was that?
1994.
Wow. Amazing.
Laughing at me and indulging me and thinking I was a wacko, until I got 350 people at this conference, which they were astonished about. And then it took a month or so to form Tara after that, and we began like January 95. It was December 9th, 1993, Marsha came, and she gave her talk, and programs started opening up after they heard that. The program at Cornell Weill, the woman came over to me and said, oh, we started that program after the conference we went to. I had no idea of what this mental health world was like at that time. But since I live in New York and I had to get a lot of help to do all of this, I wound up with some of the top people, because John Oldham was the head of Columbia and he became the head of the American Psychiatric Association. He was on the board, he was helping us. And so I wound up in the middle of the top people from Go. And there was tremendous resistance to Marsha Linehan when I began. because this was a psychoanalytic world, and Otto Kernberg had done transference-focused therapy. And here was this woman, and I remember watching her on this, stage, walking back and forth. This woman, this very tall, big woman walking back and forth. And one time she was at Grand Rounds, and they were challenging her left and right, and she just stood there. And I was very impressed with her ability to take this all on. So it was firstly that she had a different kind of a treatment, and you cannot take out of the equation the fact that she was a woman. And John
Yeah.
Gunderson used to come up to me all the time and say to me, "What's with you and that Marshall in hand?" And I didn't understand the politics then, so I thought he thought I was gay.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I mean, I just didn't understand it. But I then began to learn about the politics of the science world. You wanted me to keep going on that tack.
I do because I'll say why is because I think a lot of the politics, and I don't know any of it compared to what you do, but I know that when I've talked to researchers and other people who have tried to develop non-DBT treatments, that they feel very like discredited or siloed, and that like all of the focus goes to one type of treatment, and also just the dissemination of research evidence is not
Not
good.
happening.
Like we need to do that more. It's the reason that there's so much, I mean,
I
stigma, discrimination, misunderstanding.
I
Yeah.
prepared a whole presentation on that. But if you want to know about the politics, okay, I didn't plan on doing this kind of a talk, but let's go where it goes. Um, Everybody who is on this line, I don't know how many people will ever listen to this. When you say BPD, that is a diagnosis. And it is not a diagnosis of a disorder. It is a diagnosis, as one of my people with lived experience said, it's a diagnosis of behavior. And I didn't realize that until she said it to me just last week, and it's so true. And I have to talk about the history of borderline personality disorder to make this make any sense. If you look at the history of psychiatry, I mean, they were throwing people into mental institutions and chaining them up and treating them terribly, and there was no diagnosis of anything. And the world was divided into those who were delusional, which would go into schizophrenia or people who are in acute manic states, or those who were mentally impaired, like somebody who had Down syndrome or maybe severe autism. And those people were thrown into hospitals, into asylums. And I used to teach science. And if you look at the history of science, if you look at the history of astronomy, you look at the history of medicine, it's just fraught with errors. When they didn't know what to do, somebody guessed at something, and somebody said, "Well, he's very smart. He must know what he's doing." And so people just came up with something. There was no such thing as trials and uh, clinical trials and placebo effect. What is happening? The Tibetans were the first people who understood the body, because it's a fascinating thing to understand. Tibet is in the Himalayas, and it's very cold, and the earth is very hard, and you don't dig graves. So they threw people on the top of the mountain, and the vultures came, and then they got the bones, and they understood a great deal about the inside of bodies because they got to see them. The rest of medicine, a lot of it was just guessing. And when Freud came along, he guessed at the unconscious mind, but there was still no science. And when you think about it, what stopped the advance of psychiatry was you could not look at a brain that was working until you could only look at a brain when somebody was dead. You had no idea about circuits, you had no idea about transmitters. So the first time they ever figured out that the brain had something to do with behavior. I don't know if you've ever heard of the case of Phineas Gage.
I have indeed. Yes, I have.
Everybody learns about Phineas Gage. They learn about Phineas Gage, but they didn't realize what Phineas Gage was teaching them. Phineas Gage was a worker on the railroads in the West, where they were building the railroads. And he was a nice guy, a good husband. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he didn't philander, he didn't do anything awful, he didn't gamble. And he was a good father. He was a good worker. They were raising him up in the company because he was so reliable. And he was in charge of a group of guys, and their job was to drill holes in the rocks, put blasting powder in, ignite it so that the rocks would break down so they could haul them away so they could put down the railroad tracks. And he had a whole crew he was responsible for. One day, somebody made a mistake, and they did something with the blasting powder, and they had a tamping rod to push the blasting powder deep into the rock so it would be efficient. And somebody did something wrong with the tamping rod, and when they ignited the blasting powder, it went in, if anybody can see us, from inside your eye right through up into out of your head. So it passed through like just the bridge of your nose and up. And in psychobabble world, it passed through what we call the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex, we now know, is the executive function of the brain. It controls impulses, it makes judgments, it controls, urges and things. Well, Phineas Gage, there happened to be a doctor on hand. He kept the wound clean. Somehow he survived the accident, but he turned into somebody else. I call him the first borderline. He then became impulsive. He would fight with everyone. He took everything the wrong way. He'd get into fights. He beat his wife. He became a drunk. They wound up burying him in Potter's Field. He lost his job. He was homeless. So he was the first person who showed that an injury to the brain would cause a change in personality. And that was 1848, if I have my numbers correct. So it wasn't until we developed the machines to look into the brain that we made really any progress. Everything up until then was guessing. So when you think about guessing, think about all the things that they said about, forget about mental illness. People who got tuberculosis or degenerates who hung out in bars and cafes. Leeches would help with disorders. We should bleed people to get them better. Semmelweis was told that he was crazy because he wanted the doctors to wash their hands before they went into the pregnant women and delivered the babies. So science is fraught with
Hysteria as a concept.
yeah, all of science is errors. So you guys rely on the DSM. I don't even look at the DSM anymore. The DSM is developed by a bunch of guys sitting around a table and arguing about what they think should go into the diagnosis. Should I tell my famous story of the DSM-5?
Please do.
We are in the personality community. I remember this so clearly, and it's so bizarre that I thought I was making it up. And I was just at a conference in Antwerp with the same people. And I went up to one of the guys and said, do you remember that? Did that happen? He says, yeah. And he described the whole story to me. Here's what happened. A committee was formed by the American Psychiatric Association to revise the DSM-5 in the year 2000. And a committee was assigned, and they got money from the American Psychiatric. They sat around with meetings, and they came up with a new DSM. And the guy in charge of it at the American Psychiatric Association, every Sunday and Tuesday, there were sessions about personality disorder, particularly on borderline. And we would have a dinner at a restaurant the Sunday night of the APA, the Tuesday, I think the Sunday night. And everyone was there. John Gunderson, Otto Kernberg, every name you can think of, anybody who ever published, we're all at this fancy dinner. And the guy who was in charge of developing the new guidelines for the DSM stood up and he said, okay, I'm going to read what we decided. And John Gunderson, if everyone knows who he was the one who was the head of McLean and developed general psychiatric management. He stood up, I will never forget it, and he said, who is we? And there was this silence. And then John said, I'm not in we. Why am I not in we? Who's we? And then Otto Kernberg got up. Now that's like the biggest names, like like Beyonce and whatever got up. And Otto Kernberg said, I'm not we. I didn't decide on that. And pandemonium broke out. There was screaming and yelling and blah, blah, blah. And it went on and on and on. And the next day, there was a new DSM. All the work they had done, all the research, blah, 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 gone. And they completely changed it that night.
This was for the DSM-5?
Yeah.
So they changed it, like Gunderson and everybody?
The night before.
Do you remember what the changes were? Like, what was it supposed to look like?
Who knows what it was, what was going to be? The point is, the thing that's missing from the changes and from the whole discussion.
Research?
Science and research.
Yeah.
So when people come to me and say, oh, well, 9 characteristics and there she has 4 or 5, I don't listen. I mean, you don't have 9, you have 4, but you still want to kill yourself. Are you now recovered? Come on. So I think that one of the biggest drawbacks that we have towards advancing treatment and research is reliance on the DSM. And some of the very top people in the field are now really holding conferences and meetings. There's another one coming up in March in France about changing the DSM. And the European way is difficult as well, but not as bad as the DSM.
That's the ICD?
Yeah, the ICD. And when they changed the fact that you could firstly, they said you could diagnose kids who were under 18 if they had the symptoms for a period of time. But in 2000, there was no more age range. And if I had $1, Lori, for every phone call I get from a parent that says they won't diagnose my child because they're not 18 or they only have traits, you and I could go to the Riviera and have a nice vacation.
I would love that. But yeah, I mean, I was diagnosed at either 18 or 19, and that's not a coincidence. You know what I mean? Like, these symptoms were present in my life for much, much longer than that. I'm sure that it was on my charts or in clinicians' heads.
Well, the thing that makes me so upset about this is that there is a very clear-cut biological basis to borderline personality disorder. And it underlines, it's all the same as substance abuse, eating disorders, alcoholism, PTSD. It all has to do with certain biological characteristics. And by not informing the person of what's going on, not listening to the parents saying, my child is very sensitive. Oh, they'll grow out of it. It's absolutely awful. And the parents do not understand what's going on. And they try to control the behavior. They're giving wrong advice. And a dynamic sets up within families where they become enemies instead of building the connection and the support and the compassion and the love that could heal. So it's like a rolling ball goes down and it keeps gathering moss with that whole kind of thing. The first thing is sensitivity. Most people tell me that their children were very sensitive as children. I just did a session with a family the other night. They were telling me how they can't eat dinner with their loved one because she can't stand the sound of the chewing and of the fork against the plates. It's misophonia. But there's evidence that people with BPD have super high sensitivity to the point that sometimes they have sensory processing disorder. So when they go to the pediatrician and they say, my child is very sensitive, what do you think the pediatricians tell them? They'll grow out of it. Don't worry.
Yeah. It's funny, though, because I was literally saying yesterday to my husband, I can't remember what it was about, but there was some noise that was happening. And I just was like noise and smell, I'm still hypersensitive to. And
always will be.
Yeah. And it's just something that we know now, right? So I use noise canceling headphones all the time. And it just is something that you get used to, but I never grew out of it. That's for sure.
Well, you can't grow out of it. It's like growing out of your blood or growing out of your nose. It's part of it. The point is that BPD has genetic components and it runs in families. Now, when I say it runs in families, remember in high school, you did those little Mendelian sweet peas and the blue eyes and the brown eyes.
Yep.
It doesn't that. You get one trait, somebody else gets two traits, somebody gets it 30%, somebody gets it 60%, and you have evolutionary traits. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned in the last, I'd say, 5 years that has completely changed my thinking. So do you want me to?
Yeah, how so?
Well, running a helpline for the last 30 years or so, I collect data on all the calls, running groups with families, groups with people with lived experience. I kept hearing the same thing. I kept hearing the same stories and hearing the same sentences. And I remember in college, nature doesn't do anything for nothing. There's a reason for everything in nature. Why are these people all saying the same thing? You're trying to control me. This food smells funny. I don't want to wear this. It's itchy. There has to be a reason. So I started to look at evolution. So I started to think about these people just don't fit in the world we live in. And what is wrong with the world we live in? Well, we're dying from overstimulation.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like going shopping anymore because I walk into one shop and they're playing one kind of music. I go into the next store, they're playing another kind of music. It's like you're getting sound blasted and you can't think because this like Zoom is playing in your ears. Why are we listening to that? How, if you're sensitive to sound, how do you filter out the sounds? I live near a tunnel that goes to New Jersey. Every Thursday and every Friday, about 3, 4 o'clock, the horns start honking because the cars are lined up to get into the tunnel. How do people tune that out? Well, go back and be in kindergarten. What happens to a kid going to kindergarten? They've lived in a quiet world with their mom and their family. Maybe they have play dates. Now they're in a kindergarten class with what, 10 kids, 15 kids, 20 kids? All the kids are moving. All the kids are whispering, talking. Some kid has a smelly lunch. Some kid peed in his pants and it smells awful. The teacher says, now come to the blackboard and do blah, blah, blah. And the kid feels embarrassed and shamed and he can't deal with school. And so somebody takes him to a shrink or a general practitioner. And Lori, what diagnosis do they give him?
Autism?
No,
ADHD?
ADHD.
Yeah.
Does that kid have ADHD? Does he have a problem learning or concentrating? Or is he overwhelmed
By the overwhelming environment?
by the overwhelming environment that he has too much sensitivity to adapt to? The first time I ever had a window into this is I had just done the conference with Marshall and Ann, and I followed it up. I started a support group. And I had my very first support group. I was not trained to run support groups. I just, hello, support group.
It happens, yeah.
And I had 25 parents there. And one woman said, she's really a rough and tough woman. I call her the truck driver lady. She came in and she said, my kid was a pain in the ass from the day I took her home from the hospital. She never slept. And I went like, what do I do now? And suddenly all these hands went up in the room. And somebody said, my kid too. And there was this open discussion about kids, infants, not people who've been traumatized, not people who had lived experience, babies coming home from the hospital. They didn't sleep. They slept in the day. They didn't sleep at night. And the parents didn't know what to do. Well, I since found out that people with BPD have high cortisol, they're hypervigilant, and they're dysregulated on circadian rhythm. Hello. So I was dumbfounded. 50% of the parents in that room agreed with that woman. 12, 13 out of 25.
So I don't think we'll ever know the actual answer to this, but I think about that a lot in that people who have had very traumatizing births for like the mother's side, and then they come home and their kid is overstimulated and they're just like, this is way too much for me. Do you feel like that all kind of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like it kind of starts from square one of being too much and then it just is too much forever?
The point being, I actually thought about this in the last week or two. If a child is not sleeping, I went to a sleep conference at Columbia a while ago, and I said, are you familiar with BPD? And he says, oh, most of my patients have BPD. And he said, well, it's high cortisol. Cortisol is when you have fight or flight, you have high cortisol. So go back to evolution, and then I'll answer your question. If you look at evolution, let's make you and me and 12 other people be a group running around in the caveman time, and we're running around in the forest primeval, and what do we have to do as a group? What do we need to do every day?
Well, find food, protect ourselves,
stay alive, find food, and not get eaten up by somebody else or some other tribe or some other bird. We have to stay alive. And we have to procreate, and that's an urge. So if you were running around in that group and you were all sleeping by the campfire, and some lion or some elephant or some coyote was approaching your campfire, who would be the survivor of that experience?
The person who was aware enough to run fast at first.
That's exactly correct.
Or fight back, I suppose, but whoever's the most quick to act.
So, Lori, you are now a neuroscientist. You got it.
Yay! My parents will be so proud.
But the psychobabble term for that is hypervigilance.
Yeah.
And hypervigilant means you have a very, very sensitive fight or flight system. And you create that upswing so that you're ready to fight, and your prefrontal cortex of logic goes off, and all you're going to do is run or fight, and you're going to survive. Now, your children are going to be stronger at fight or flight like this than the guy who doesn't wake up, because he's the coyote's dinner. So the brain evolved for all of these traits. They do not fit in today's world. So evolutionary way, we have genes, and we have hypervigilance, hypersensitivity. We have oxytocin to connect, because social behavior was just as important as hypervigilance. So we have inherited, each one of us, the drives for hypervigilance, hypersensitivity, and social connection. Well, why is it so hard to understand that everybody's not the same and people have different degrees of hypervigilance, hypersensitivity, and so on? I mean, every study I read, it's on the assumption that we're all starting at ground zero. Does that make sense to you?
No, not at all.
I mean, when you think about your friends in kindergarten, everybody had a different personality, different weight, so on and so forth. Hypervigilance and hypersensitivity can be viewed in a society where it doesn't fit as negativity.
And negativity comes up a lot in the BPD research around like the kind of bias towards negative thinking all the time.
But it's not just bias towards negative thinking, it's rejection sensitivity. It's thinking that, what do you think anxiety is? Anxiety is biased into negative. This is not going to work out. This is going to be dangerous, and so on. The other side of it is that, what about positivity? And positivity is regulated by your dopamine system, which doesn't work right with folks with BPD. Why do you think they give you serotonin for an antidepressant? It's another system that deals with feeling positive. And there's a lot of research on oxytocin, but are you familiar with oxytocin? Do you know the role of oxytocin?
I know that it's like it makes like moms love babies, right?
Yeah.
Like I know they give it to moms when they're giving birth, don't they?
No, but moms make it naturally.
Oh, okay, but I think, can't they give it to them? Like, isn't there like an alternative?
Not figured out yet. People oxytocin.
Interesting. Okay.
But the point is that the child that's born has oxytocin, and oxytocin has different levels. Go back to heroin addicts. If you cut yourself, if you have an accident or an injury, you don't feel it for a while, course, nature's very smart. It gave you some time to get out of Dodge, to get some help, to get
Yeah.
out of the lion's mouth, so on. And that's called endogenous opioids. So you have an opioid system in your body that will make you feel good. Well, somebody told me, the reason I take heroin is it makes me feel normal. Well, nowadays they treat opioid addiction by giving them buprenorphine or Zyprexa, which is giving them opioids to raise the level.
Right, because they probably just don't naturally create that level on their own.
They don't. So all of the areas where you're supposed to be able to feel good have something wrong. The dopamine, oxytocin, the endogenous opioids, and serotonin, 4 different systems. So they're negative and they have difficulty feeling positive. Well, if people recognize this, wouldn't they treat these people differently?
You'd hope so.
By the time the families come to me, they have the stigma against borderline, in my humble opinion, comes from the clinicians, comes from the science.
I don't think that's just your opinion. I think that's proven in research too.
It is so bad. When
Yep.
this person said to me the other day, instead of giving me a diagnosis, they told me it was behavior. Well, if it's behavior, I have to control it. I have to teach it. I have to, get it. I have to be a parent and do what I have to do.
And I don't know how. I've never been taught how to do that.
And either does anybody else. And I can accept that my kid is different and maybe he's allergic to peanuts and I shouldn't give him peanut sauce for dinner, or say, the parents, I asked them, what do you think about people with BPD? And they write a list. And everything on the list that they write is a result of not being told where the things come from, what to do with it, and interpreting it from just a regular point of view. If you tell your kid to take out the garbage and they yell at you, you think the kid is a brat, and then you say, oh, blah, 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 and I don't want to help this kid, let him go get a job. I went to a conference and it was on some kind of family program, and the kid, when parents asked me, how long do I support my children? He's 20, he's 25, how long do I give him money? I have this terrible New York kind of sense of humor. I don't know if they all get it. I say, well, you do it until the day they throw the dirt on your coffin.
Yeah, you signed up for that.
So they don't understand. The point is to accept this kid has a disability of some sort, that he doesn't fit in today's world, and he's not doing this on purpose. And nobody wants to get money from their parents or be dependent on them. And let's deal with it. Let's accept it. And it's just so awful that they get this information from the therapists, from the clinicians, and now everybody's been traumatized. Well, I think that the reason the advocacy for borderline has not become like the advocacy for AIDS, which was in your face and we demand help, is because by the time the parents come in, they are so guilt-ridden and so angry. And I tell people, don't read any borderline books because they are so negative.
Yep.
When I read what's on the internet, why would anybody admit they had borderline? Anybody who does,
I know. You're going to die alone. Nobody's going to love you. Nobody's going to treat you. You're a horrible person.
You're a manipulator, blah, blah, blah.
That's why I do this podcast, is because that's when I was diagnosed. I Googled it and that's all I found. And I was like, there's got to be other stories out there. Not these are the stories,
Maybe these people are very creative. They're very sensitive to emotions. They're very sensitive to other people. Unfortunately, they pick up a lot of negativity from other people, and they're correct. They read the emotions. So we teach about implicit bias. And that's one of the biggest things we work on with families, is that if you walk in and you've been told your child is a behavior problem and blah, 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 and they don't want to work and they just want you to support them and they're lazy and they're manipulative. Well, you're angry and you feel you haven't been appreciated. It hasn't changed. I'm telling you. And once DBT came in, it sort of put a lock on other treatments being accepted. So,
Yeah, I want to talk about that because I've heard that a lot from people who do other treatments. And I think you do mentalization-based
very
therapy.
much. I support it, really. I teach it.
Yeah. So, I mean, just full disclosure, my life has been incredibly positively changed by DBT. 100,000%. I credit that for so
I,
much. I use the skills every day. But I also acknowledge that it doesn't work for everybody. It's super hard to access. And there's probably tons of other treatments out there that I just haven't had an opportunity to try. So, can you give us like a 2-minute overview of what mentalization-based therapy is?
I'll try to give it for more than 2 minutes.
You can give it, you can talk longer, but I'm just curious.
Well, DBT, Marsha Linehan had BPD, and it was pretty bad because her arms were cut up left and right. She was hospitalized for several years. I know her whole family. She was difficult, and one of my parents said that the best thing about DBT is that it was developed by a person with BPD, and the worst thing about DBT is that it was developed by a person with BPD.
Look at that
So,
dialectic right there.
right, and DBT, it understood what some of the problems were, but it approached them from a very cognitive basis, like do this, say this, dear man, describe, express, appear. It was like, and you had to remember all of that stuff. And for some people, that is very hard. And what's also very hard is there's a lot of rules and regulations for how you do DBT. You have to be, I'm intensively trained. You had to get the seal of approval from Marsha. She used to rage about all these people teaching DBT who aren't part of BTEC and so on. In a lot of ways, I think she was absolutely right, because if you do a treatment, you follow it the way it was designed. You don't just say,
Yeah.
I'll do a little of column A and a little of column B. So
But it's also such an intensive treatment that it's so hard for people to follow it to the book because people don't have the resources for that.
well, it's also it's very cognitive, and she what I realize now after all these years, especially since I work with Peter Fonagy and Anthony Bateman, and I'm constantly nagging them more. We want more MDT and so on. I watched how Marsha distributed DBT. I don't know if you know how she did that. It
Not really.
was very interesting how she did it. When she published her book in 1993 and started going around and trying to, disseminate DBT,
Mhm. I'm
you,
reading that book right now. Oh, is it the sheet you could send everybody that was the most difficult clients you could send to her? She talked about that in the book.
well, maybe when she was in Seattle first developing it.
Yeah.
No, but I'm talking about when DBT became a manualized treatment. When she published that book, how did she get that book into these different hospitals and programs? And now that I'm very well versed in the mental health world, I see what she did. If you, Lori, were a therapist and you wanted to learn DBT, you could not learn DBT. It was not allowed. When I first went, I had to bring a Tara team. The team had to be a minimum of 4 people. Four
Interesting.
people had to go to Seattle and spend one full week learning DBT. And then we would leave and we had to come back in 6 months, take exams, and you had to report the program you developed to implement DBT. You could
Interesting.
not do DBT if you were a hospital. You had to get the head of psychiatry in that hospital to sign on to establishing a DBT program in that hospital before she would allow you to come to a training.
Which
The
is like very interesting because that could have backfired on her. It could have been too much of an administrative burden for organizations and they would have just
It
not
was
bothered.
a huge administrative burden, and she insisted that there be a session for the therapist to discuss the whole deal with each other, which is non-paid service. So
Interesting.
how did we help her do that? So yours truly, like for example, Baltimore, Shepherd Pratt, St. Luke's Roosevelt, New York. North Shore in New York City. I would get together a group of parents who were struggling with this. We would go to the head of the hospital and we would demand that they put DBT in and why it would help and blah, blah, blah. And we would bring them patients and they needed this and blah, blah, blah. That's how she did it. So
Interesting.
it became a thing by making it hard to get. They had to sign up to all those rules. Now, I am a devotee of MBT. I recently went to an MBT training in California online, and there were some therapists there, and I looked up the therapist on the internet. Not one therapist on their website said, I'm an MBT therapist.
Interesting.
So, in other words, if I wanted to find an MBT therapist, they didn't think it was important enough to
To
say,
list that.
to list it. Whereas if you were a DBT therapist, you were a superstar.
Yeah.
So it was a marketing device that the doctors resented her for it. She's a very tough woman. I mean, she really
I have no doubt. I wish that I knew her.
she stood up for what she believed in, but she had help from people who set that up. And when I just told that to Peter Fonagy. I said, look what Marcia did. You need it. Let us help you do that. We'll go to the hospitals. We'll go and make them sign on their website that they do MBT. They're British. They're very correct. They don't, marketing is dirty. You understand.
Right. They need that good American capitalism to come and get behind them.
I come in with my New York big mouth and the way I'm so
Yeah.
direct. It's like, Peter, we need you. So he's now listening to me, finally. I actually have been put in touch with somebody, and hopefully we can work to get it out. Now, let me tell you what MBT is. First of all, DBT is a behavioral therapy. Borderline is an emotional disorder. It's not a behavioral disorder. It starts out with emotions.
Yeah. The behaviors are like a result of our emotions.
Behaviors are a result of your emotions. And an emotion, I even dug up a definition for you for emotion. Let me see if I can find it for you, just to make sure I wasn't leading anyone astray here. I worry a great deal that I say a lot of things that I know your average interview person is not talking about, but I have to back up every word.
Yeah.
Science, and if anybody wants to challenge me, bring it on, because I do have the science.
Mm-hmm.
Office looks like a library when you go to open a drawer and it's filled with studies. Hang on. An emotion here. Emotions is a natural instinctive state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationship with others. Their responses to significant internal or external events, the reactions that human beings experience in response to events or situations. They're completely natural. So I don't believe borderlines are impulsive. I do not. I believe that something happens and they get triggered and an emotion comes. And then that emotion leads to a behavior. The problem is that you and I are talking. So you have to understand what I'm saying and feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to understand what you say and feel it. And that depends basically on, in the transaction between us, there's a level of trust.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a nonverbal trust that we feel. We feel this when we talk to people. Do you ever fall in love with somebody, you look at them, you have this connection.
Yep.
The connection is an oxytocin thing, but you feel it when you talk to somebody. Well, your people who have BPD are super hypersensitive. You just have mother roll her eyes, let your boyfriend raise his eyebrow when you put the dinner down, and that is translated.
Yeah.
The problem with BPD is perception. So you have something happens and you perceive it. You don't see with your eyes. Your retina sends information to a part of your brain, and then it goes up further in your brain to the thalamus and then up. And it's only when you interpret it and name it, then you know what you're seeing. you have to name and perceive something. Nobody talks about perception. The problem
Yeah.
with interpersonal relationships is that the perception has to make people feel that they understand the intention of somebody else's behavior. So mentalization is based on the fact that we don't know what somebody else is thinking. They don't know what we're thinking. And we make a lot of presumptions, and sometimes we're wrong. And what we're aiming for is that connection of trust and understanding. So, how do you get at that? It's a very simple philosophical and treatment thing. It's very simple. You clarify, you ask questions. So, mentalization would be how many people with BPD complain that their parents don't listen to them? Have you heard that sentence?
Oh, yeah.
You
Lots.
don't listen to me and you don't understand me.
Yeah.
Is that not the mantra?
hmm To be fair, I feel like that's the mantra of a lot of teenagers as well. So sometimes I can see where that gets a little bit confused, but yeah, no, I definitely have heard that.
Actually, I'm addressing that a lot with teenagers nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
There's a wonderful book. It's right here. And you can look him up and you can hear him speak. It's called The Anxious Generation.
Okay.
And it's by Jonathan Haidt. And he's talking about the over reliance on the cell phones, and that I now include a generation class with the parents to show them that what year were you born in?
93.
I'm going to be 87. You and I are in two different generations.
Very much so.
Very much so.
Maybe
And
three different, like,
four.
yeah.
So if we don't understand each other's generation, so the bottom line is we have to understand generationally, we have to understand emotionally, we have to understand expectations. So how do you clarify communication? Well, I tell everybody to watch Columbo. You ask questions.
Mm,
Lori, it is amazing how we do not know how to talk to one another.
yeah.
Well, it looks like I just got you angry. It wasn't my intention. What just happened? Can
Mhm.
we talk about it? And you want to know what you can do with that emotion that you have the whole list of what to do with? You can bring it down as soon as you lower the fight or flight of hypervigilance. Because if you think somebody's intention is negative towards you, is to harm you, what do you think happens? Up goes fight or flight, out goes communication.
Mhm.
And I teach it to families, and it is the most effective thing. It takes a long time to get them to trust me enough to believe that this can make a difference.
I bet.
But it repairs relationships. And you know what it brings about? A lot of parents have to apologize to their children, not for what they did, but for what not realizing how it affected the children, how it hurt them, how when you told me, are you going to wear that dress? How it made me feel ashamed, how it made me feel bad, unacceptable. And it's very, I think it's much simpler to learn than cognitive therapy. It is a therapy that is based totally on emotional communication,
Hmm.
not about cognition. It's about compassion, trust, heart. That's why I love it.
So
Because
does that have to go? I mean, I guess in all therapies, it's helpful for people to be kind of speaking the same language. But like, for example, let's say this is not the case, but let's say my husband and I have horrible communication and we can't talk about emotions, but I'm the only one doing MBT. Is that beneficial? Like, I can talk to him about emotions, but he can't talk to me about emotions in the way that I need him to?
it's not a question of talk about emotions. Give me an example of something that you would have a disagreement about, something that would come up.
We like literally never have disagreements.
Whatever.
Let's say okay, so our cat is sick right now and we have to take him to the vet. And one time, and like he maybe wants to pay for a procedure that I'm not sure we should pay for. Let's say that.
Okay, that's a complicated one. So you don't want to pay for the procedure. You don't think that
Yeah,
you can
hypothetically. Yeah.
say, so you would say to him, It looks like we're seeing this from different perspectives. So can you help me out, please? Can you tell me why you think we don't have any other options? Because I'm confused. Can you explain it to me? Can you clarify what you're thinking? So the point is, in a humble way, you're asking him to explain his thoughts about it. And you could say, well, when you say that, I get really scared because I'm afraid that that's very extreme, and I worry that he might, die and so on. And I just would like to give him a little. You have a discussion, but you don't have the discussion up. You have to put in the feelings and the request for clarification.
Request for
The
clarification.
question
I
is,
like that.
what makes you think that that's our only alternative? Help me out. I'd like to know. I just would like to start slower. What is it that makes you feel you have to go to the extreme? Well, that's a tough example, but if you're having a discussion with him and you see his face clouds over and you say to him, it looks like my disagreeing with you got you very angry. Did I read it right? So the other thing is when you say, I notice this emotion, you never say, oh, I see you're angry.
Totally. Yeah.
Because
Like
you
describe. You can't describe what they're feeling. You can only describe what
don't
you're
know what
observing.
anybody else is feeling. And then you say something very humble. Did I get that right? Is that what you're feeling? Can you help me out? I really want to understand. So the whole interaction in mentalization, it's clarity, it's humility, it's compassion. It's very simple. Why does it take long to teach it? Because in its simplicity, you're challenging people's basic way that they've learned to communicate in our society, which is sometimes when I say to the parents, ask her, did I say something to get you upset? It wasn't my intention. Oh, if I say that, she'll say.
Right. Don't mind read.
So I say, listen, my crystal ball is over there. And then I say to them, do you all believe in Christ? Do you go to church? Do you believe in Jesus? Have you ever met him? But you believe in him. You trust him. You got to trust somebody. I mean, I say outrageous things. I
I
know that.
love it.
But
It's
I have to
perfect.
hit them over the head because a life is at stake. Every person with BPD whose parent or partner is in my class, we are fighting for their life. We are not fighting for, that they should have a nice party or a good divorce. There is always in the back of my mind, you screw it up enough and this person could kill themselves.
100%.
And the biggest thing for me is the shaming, is how easy people don't understand what shame is. We do a 3-hour class on shame because
Wow.
parents don't understand it. I don't know if I'm giving you a picture of what we do, but everything starts with the biology. Why this person doesn't fit in today's very noisy, complicated, confusing world, that you have to change. And that if you don't trigger them, you get that lovely person that you love, that you want to be with, that has great qualities. And if you're going to trigger them and make them feel unsafe, then you're going to get the behavior you don't want because they're defending themselves. So
Yeah.
what's the big deal? She's a nurse and she gets very angry at this. And she says, if somebody had an accident where they were really disabled and you had to put a hospital bed in your living room and you had to change diapers on this person and they were 25 years old and you had to put IV drips in, you would do it. But if you have to make this change in how you ask somebody to take out the garbage,
Right.
why is that? But it's so hard. But once they have a little bit of success with it, it changes. And we repair relationships. 35% of families are estranged. That's not right.
Of all families or people with borderline?
I don't know if it's all families or BPD, but whichever way it is, it's awful.
Yeah, true. I mean, the first thing that you said to me when we talked on the phone the first day is like, you tell your mom I'll call her right now and I'll talk to her. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I appreciate the offer, but I need to think about that. But
Uh,
it's true. I mean, I run peer support. It's called the Super Feelers Club for people with BPD or like similar, not diagnosis specific necessarily. And I would say 50% of every session is talking about somebody's family that they're not talking to or is not talking to them. Like every single session. And it's sad, but the reality.
well, here's why it's even sadder. If you start looking at the oxytocin literature, a child is born with oxytocin. The mother, father, oxytocin, vasopressin, immediate kind of connection. That connection lasts forever. It's my personal feeling, the strongest connection that there is. That connection can heal. That connection is evolutionary for survival. What we have done in our society, Peter Fonagy talks about this. We've destroyed it. We've destroyed it. Your family is toxic. You should go away from your family. Well, your family loves you, darling, whether you like it or not. They're connected to you. Build that connection. I have families, I've seen it with families where they don't talk, and there was this big, and it comes together. And it doesn't take long because the person with BPD wants the family connection. The family wants the connection with the person with BPD. They just don't know how to do it.
Hmm.
And the society, the clinical community, the clinical community encourages that. Why? Because if the brain is a black box and the person is showing signs of being traumatized, well, where's it coming from? The fact is, not recognizing the differences biologically in how people respond to situations. I tell everybody to read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. You ever read that book?
No.
He was a psychiatrist in the concentration camps.
Mm.
And he began to look at the people coming into the camps. And he was able to identify who would survive and who wouldn't make it. He could tell. And I've always asked this question, and I just got a study from alcohol that with the answer. If you send 20 soldiers to training, 20 soldiers, you send them to training, and then you send them out into the field, a war situation. I just read this amazing book called Two Women. It's a novel, but it describes war experience from the nurse's point of view. It's horrendous. Okay, 20 guys went in, 20 guys come back. Do all 20 who experience the same thing get PTSD?
No,
Why not?
because of how their predisposition to getting PTSD is. And
Exactly right.
yeah, I mean, that it's similar to any mental health issue, right? Like it's kind of like marijuana and schizophrenia. Like there's a million people that can smoke marijuana and have no issue, but then there's a few people that have this predisposition in their brain, and then it just kind of triggers it.
Well, why don't we figure out what the predisposition is before we put them in those situations?
Yep, that would be great. I mean, like we do with breast cancer now, right?
What the thing is that what we do, and it fits into the BPD symptomatology, we say it's trauma. And by saying that everything is caused by trauma, we're saying it's the other person's fault. It's not me, it's outside. I started to talk to you about the history of BPD, and that's a fascinating thing to look at. Do you know where the word borderline came from?
Yeah, the border of neuroses and psychoses. So it's halfway between the two. I mean, it depends. There's also wording around like it was just like the other category of mental health issues. So it was like people that were on the border of whatever.
Well,
But
I'm going to ask your audience to take the time to look up a man named Adolf Stern. He wrote down what he thought in 1938, and I will confess I didn't read the actual article until about 3, 4, 5 years ago, which is a shame on me. And most clinicians haven't read it. So he said, I think I have it on here. Adolf Stern said he was a psychoanalyst and he came from Vienna to New York. It was 1938, and he had a psychotherapy practice, psychoanalysis. And he wrote this article and he said, I have a group of patients in my practice, notice humility, that I can't help. My treatment doesn't work on them. They are not schizophrenic. They are not delusional. They are not cognitively impaired. They don't have any, problems with IQ or anything like that. But they are different than the regular people. And my treatment doesn't work. So they are on the borderline between delusional and this. And he wrote out a whole list of those categories. The first one is hypervigilant.
Yeah.
Is hypervigilant in the DSM?
No.
The second one was hypersensitivity. So he talked about exactly how they see themselves. Adolf Stern in 1938 said that the first thing was inordinate hypersensitivity. Listen to this: deeply insulted and injured by trifling remarks. 1938. Rigidity. So some people with borderline, you can't give them a hug or a kiss, or rigidity in their thinking. Focus on self, negativity. What looks like constitutionally rooted feelings of inferiority, deeply embedded in the personality, leading to heightened avoidance. That to me is shame.
Mm-hmm.
Victim mentality, in which they think because they don't understand the intention of other people, they think.
Right. It's about them.
Yeah. And an elaborate defense system.
There's that evolutionary piece.
Projection.
Mm-hmm.
So when they feel shame and they get angry, everything is terrible things to the family members. Inability to trust others.
100%.
Before we knew what oxytocin was, no logical understanding. Now, why was there no logical understanding? There was no logical understanding because they're totally in their amygdala and in their
Their frontal lobe hasn't kicked in for this part.
Yes. And high threat perception.
Yep. Again, elaborate defense system, high threat perception. How much more evolutionary can you get?
But does this describe?
Yep. I actually did there's like a Patreon episode that I did. It was like a bonus episode. And yeah, I talked about this. And then there was 4 or 5 others, I think, that were like the early views into what BPD was. And it's so fascinating because some of it, like most of it, made a lot of sense, to be honest.
But what happens after this is that all of these doctors, my feeling is, and this is, I get my soapbox ideas where I don't have 100% data. I think that as human beings, when we fail at something, we get mad at the thing we're failing at. Oh, I failed at because the teacher wasn't good. Oh, I got that car and it didn't work. The car wasn't any good. Of course, I drove 100 miles an hour every day and never put oil in the car, but the car was a lousy car. We don't like to fail at things that we try. I think that the doctors, when this man said, my treatment does not work on these people, I don't know what to do for them. That's what he started with. I think that because the doctors don't know how to help these people. Barbara Stanley did a lot of work on suicide. She did a lot of the suicide protocols. She said to me one day, she said, patient walks in and they're charming and they're interesting and they're lovely. And I think, oh, I really like this person. I want to help this person. And then as time goes by, they're calling me names and it's not working. And I'm all mixed up and I get angry. That's what happens. And I think that the doctors, for that reason, give the borderlines the bad name that they've gotten. And we have to put out some of the correct information based on what we already know in science so that these doctors stop telling people things that are not true.
Mm-hmm.
Just stop telling parents to put in limits and boundaries. You're alienating the people.
Mm-hmm.
They see it as punishment. They don't understand.
So for the like we're almost out of time, and I just want to talk. I don't know, maybe we need a second episode for this because I feel like we could talk for another hour and a half about this one. But I know that in our previous conversations, you've said that like you don't feel like a lot has changed in the BPD advocacy world. And I'm curious what has improved and what do you feel like are the priorities that need to be changed other than that lack of accurate modern knowledge in the scientific community?
Okay.
Do we need a full hour and a half for this? Because we can book another
I
time.
can say it very simply. I can say it very simply. And it's very painful for me to say it. Um, when I started this, because of my science background, I was married to a doctor, I went right into the science. Science is hard. People say, oh, you can't teach that. I can teach neurobiology to anybody. I will find a metaphor to make them understand. Every time you plug a thing into the wall and it works because the circuit goes, that's what's going on in your bloody brain. People will understand it if you teach it to them. There are discussions at scientific conferences that the scientists don't know how to explain their science. Okay, I know how to explain it. I find images, whatever. When I started this, I went right to the science and I started writing a book. Marcia used to say to me, Valerie, you're too biological. Marcia did not want to know a thing about the brain.
Interesting.
I approach all of this. You see how I am. I teach biology. I teach why DBT works, why mentalization works. I put it together. Teaching the parents DBT is not teaching the parents how to help. It's not enough.
Speaking the same language, though, is helpful.
Yes, but you have to figure out what the language is.
Yeah, true.
Yes. And if you don't get the biology straight, you don't understand what the languages help me out. I want to understand it was not my intention. That one word can change everything. Try it with your husband. When he gets upset about something, wasn't my intention. What just happened? Watch what happens. So I know every doctor. I'm at every scientific conference. I'm at every microphone. Everyone in the science field knows me. I'm the only one standing up for BPD with whoever comes with me. You want to come with me? I'll show you how to do it. But I could do a march. Okay, borderline awareness, but what are we changing? We have to change how people see these people, to understand them, to stop stigmatizing them, to stop seeing them manipulative, drama queens, blah, blah, blah. I don't see that. If somebody with BPD is screaming, somebody triggered them, somebody made them feel less than, somebody made them feel humiliated, not listened to, not respected, in danger. Okay, deal with that. So what I don't understand, and I really am struggling with this, and I have to tell you, in the last couple of weeks, I've met you and I've met some other people in the lived experience field. I've gotten more understanding from you guys than from anybody else. When a parent says to me, I sent my kid to a residential treatment and it cost 100,000 and I spent $500,000, and I'm thinking about how much a study costs. I'm thinking what we could do with that money.
Yeah.
And in 30 something years, one guy in London who was very, very rich said to me recently, I love what you're doing. I'd like to give money to your organization, blah, 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 to do new research. One person. If you went to a plumber and said, put a water system in my house and it didn't work, you'd sue him. Somebody says to me, oh, well, she loves her doctor. She's been going for 3 years, but right now she's acting out and we're afraid to be around. I said, well, what is the doctor doing for 3 years? If you had cancer and you went to a doctor for 3 years and you were foaming at the mouth and screaming and yelling, you'd sue the guy for malpractice. Why aren't the parents angry? I don't understand that. So my next campaign is to provoke the parents.
I love that. I feel like I feel like they're probably angry. If I had to guess, I'm not a parent. If they're probably angry, but there's so much parent hate. Yeah. Shame and parent hate in the community that they're afraid to be too loud because then they'll be blamed. Is that would be my guess.
That is my guess. My guess is that they are so beaten down by being blamed for this disorder. You know about Bruno Bettelheim and autism? And he said that the parents, oh God, you guys have to learn the history of psychiatry. It's fascinating. Bettelheim said that autism was caused by refrigerator mothers, icebox mothers.
Oh, yes. Yes. Refrigerator mothers. I remember that now.
Picture being the mother of a child who's like mute, or, and some guy says it's your fault. Well, that's what they're doing to the mothers of the borderlines.
Yeah.
That's what, okay, be a father that runs a big company, that fixes everything, that solves every problem, and be Adolf Stern. And this kid comes in, she's driving everybody crazy, doesn't finish school, doesn't have a boyfriend, doesn't have a job. Father wants to fix it, and he fails. Same as the therapist. So I think that the blaming and the failure and the implicit bias and all of that has made the parents so ashamed and so helpless and so beaten down. And when the people with BPD, God help them, when they go after them, when there's an argument, they will say, and they'll always get that kernel of truth. They'll find something that hits home.
Yep.
How lately, my age, I think, how much time do I have? I'm healthy, but if I had a heart attack this afternoon, no one would say, poor thing, she had a short life. I'm aware of that.
How old are you again?
87.
Yeah.
So, for me, I'm on limited time, even though I'm healthy. Kernberg,
Yeah.
97 or something.
Wow.
Yeah. And Beck died at 100. So I just keep thinking, how do I get the parents to realize it's not your fault? Fight for your children.
Let's leave it here. This has been such an amazing conversation, but I do want to talk about the psychedelics another time. So let's just put a pin in this and say we're definitely going to do episode 2 so you can tell me all about psychedelics because I desperately want to know more.
Your question about why there's no advocacy, about why I think nothing has changed?
Yeah, I think so. Just you answered part of it. I think you answered the part from the parent side. I think the other part is that we've just been so systematically discriminated against and silenced that we don't have the voice. Yeah, exactly. Totally. We're quote unquote bad people and we're in control and we're manipulative. So we can't, we just aren't listened to in the community. And I think that's where, loud voices are needed to be like, no, this is actually also what borderline personality disorder looks like. And, yeah, that's something that I'm going to fight for hopefully until I'm 87, Valerie.
Well, if you guys want the bullets, if you want the bullets of what you have to say, I'll give you those bullets. I'll tell you what you need to know, but you have to get past the shame and the anger. I sent you that chart on the budget. Did you see that budget?
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's lower than it ever was.
Yeah. This is there's just for those of you who haven't seen it, who aren't looking at it right now, it's the research funding for mental illnesses across the board, and borderline is literally like basically zero compared to everything else. It's crazy.
And the other part of it is that there's big dissemination, there's big problems about counting how many people have borderline, and NIMH has refused to put in the statistics from NIAAA that shows that it's 8.9% of the population have personality disorders. And
wow.
NIMH will not post that number.
Because I think it's generally understood it's like, what, 3 to 4, maybe?
Oh, lower.
Lower, yeah.
And I'm responsible for the first number, with 2% something.
Yeah.
And I got that into the study, and that was in 1995. And the study with the high number had 35,000 people, and they don't want to acknowledge that study. So they don't count it, they don't spend money on it. But if you do psychedelics, I'll explain to you why it is the biggest public health problem that there is, and that's the way we should go. I think you're wonderful for doing this, and I thank you for letting somebody hear what I have to say.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy that we met.
Anything that I could do to help the community to get what they deserve, to have a better life, and not walk around thinking you are not crazy, you're not bad people. You're just different, and difference is not a negative.
Yeah, exactly. It's what makes the world beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Valerie. I'll reach out via email about scheduling about the psychedelics because I feel like that'll be so much fun.
Oh my God, that would be interesting. I'd love to do that. Thank you, and do your
Of course.
wonderful work, and God bless you, and God bless Canada.
Thank you so much for listening to the Superfeeler podcast. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you'd like to learn more about the Superfeeler podcast, share your story, or participate in the Superfeelers Club, which is our peer support group, it's totally free, virtual, and open to anyone who experiences intense emotions or has borderline personality disorder, please check out the link in our show notes or go to laurieedmondson.com. If you would like to support the show, we would very much appreciate it. There's an option to do monthly small donations at whatever denomination you'd like, extra resources, an extra connection to me. That can be found on patreon.com/superfeeler or again in the notes below. Thanks again and have a great day.